I think one of the most important things that Prof. Ahmed had delivered to us would be that there's no single interpretation of Islam, and what is understood by Sharia in certain part of Muslim world might differ from another part of Muslim world. And the most important thing is for us to be able to embrace diversity and differences in opinions. And I think that's a major problem in this particular country, because we see that a major religious institution in this country tends to monopolize, the truth, and they will consider any other opinions to be heretical. That's a real problem in this society, and that's why they banned 3 of our books, and that's why I think that very soon, if there's no change, then this book would similarly be banned as well. And I think to allow more discussion from the floor, I would like to invite any of you that before that we have to invite the Professor Waleed Fekry, whom I've known for more than 10 years. He was a director at what we call as International Institute for Muslim Unity at the International Islamic University of Malaysia, and he hosted with me Professor Tariq Ramadan when he first came over here. So we have been good friends ever since, and it's very good to have him over here. And even though he was not around last night for our reading session, but I believe that he has some input for this particular session. I would like to invite you, Prof.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First, I would like to thank Dr. Faruq for this invitation. I really appreciate it. And also, it's a pleasure to see Dr. Abdullahi Naim, because I heard of him. I read some work for him, but I've never met him. So this is a good opportunity to meet him. I think there are 2 levels of discussion we are discussing about today. One is concerning the book, and the other one is concerning the question of reformation. So, and they are not tied together, though the book is looking into this reformation direction, but we need to put a kind of a framework, and this is what I'm planning to talk about. First, about the book, I really admire Dr. Abdullahi Naim for the way he presented his work in the book, and of course he's a well-known scholar. And we are lacking of this type of approach. When you present your ideas, you need to be humble in presenting your ideas. You don't present it in a way of determinism. Sometimes some people will put it in a very deterministic way that reminds me of the Communist Manifesto, the people who are talking in a very deterministic way. And at the end of the day, it's, as he mentioned, it's our Islamic tradition that at the end of anything we do, we say, Allahu A'lam, Allah knows the best. We don't know. This is our, the maximum that we can do, or the maximum that we understand about this issue. The other thing also, which I really encourage everybody to look into it, there is one chapter, of course I'm not sure about the translation in Bahasa, I read it in English. There is one chapter about the methodology. And this is very important chapter. In my opinion, this is the most important chapter. This is as a reader to the book. Why? Because it gives you the tools that Professor Abdullah Naim put forward his discussion. And then once you know the methodology, you can discuss, you can argue, you can criticize it. It's up to you, because it's very clear how he is building up his argument. And this is how it should be in any scholarly work. Coming back to the issue of reformation and deformation and this thing, I want to put a few principles that we need to agree upon in the beginning, or hopefully we can agree upon. Number one, debate of ideas is always fruitful. Debate of ideas is always fruitful, as long as we are not politicizing it. So once we start to politicize ideas, then we are getting into trouble. So when we debate about different ideas, whether it's a religious idea or even social ideas, it's good to bring it always to a kind of a platform which people are sincere and interested to reach the truth. That's it. And then if we do this, then we will reach the truth. But if we start to politicize the ideas, then we are getting into a big trouble. And there's something I call, we need to refer to the political history of religion. And what I mean by political history of religion is, this is not Islam only, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, how the religion, when it was in power in a certain part of the world, and when people try to politicize ideas, then it will always go to conflicts. It will always go to conflicts. But the best governments during the history of all religion also was the government which will hold to principles, and will leave the debate of ideas to be open for people just debating on whatever they want to. And it's interesting, in the early time of Islam, especially during what we call Khilafah Rashida, the guided caliphate, as known in the Islamic tradition, the early Khulafa, Abu Bakr, Umar, even Uthman, those people never interfered in the debate among scholars at this time. So people were debating ideas, but they are just holding the principles of the religion. They are defending the principles of the religion and defending also all the rights of the people under this new government, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims or whatever. But later things came a bit haywire for many reasons that there is no time to check on these issues. When we talk about Islamic Reformation, I think this idea has been quite old in Islam, the idea of Reformation. And we have many scholars, quite well known, and this is also well documented, many scholars who have brought new ideas at a certain point of time in the history of Islam. And people are looking at reforming Islamic thought, not reforming Islam, because there is a bit of a kind of a tension when people call reforming Islam. Because once you say I'm reforming religion, then means that you are going to change part of it. But it's reforming the thought, which is a human production. At the end of the day, whatever people thought about, interpreted the sources of Islam, then it's a human production which can be reformed, definitely can be reformed. And it's changing in time. There was a recent book, not very recent, I think 3 years ago, by a Cambridge scholar on Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. I think maybe some of you might heard this name because also quite popular in many quarters of the Muslim world. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali is 800 years back, even more, 900 years back. And the book was written, al-Ghazali, the first revivalist. And he was putting Abu Hamid al-Ghazali ideas as a kind of, in the right perspective, as a kind of a reformation in the Islamic thought of his time. So the idea of reforming Islamic thought is not new in Islam. It's not new. It has been and it will continue. And it always comes with a challenge. When you are challenged with environment, when you are challenged with a situation that push you to look into, is it really what I'm practicing is Islam, or it is my understanding of Islam? So usually people will try to look back at the sources, and then we heard everybody stressing on the sources here, and this is the right way. So everybody is stressing at the Quran as a source, everybody is stressing at the Sirah as one of the sources. So when we go back to this, we try to see whether what we are doing is really Islam or something else, or it's our perception. It's our perception of Islam. And there is one interesting also issue about Reformation, that starting from the colonial period, and I will open this for discussion, maybe I would be interested to hear any input, correct me, or trying to give me a bit more light on whatever I'm collecting. Starting from the colonial period, we had a bit of a problematic approaches to Reformation of Islam. This is what I call. As I mentioned, Reformation in Islamic thought thought was quite old in Islam. Every period of time there is some scholars coming up with new ideas and try to put it, and these ideas sometimes will become a kind of a streamline ideas and mainstream of Islamic mainstream. But with the colonial era in the Muslim world, and with the reactions and also trauma in many of the Muslim quarters, we still have reformers who had a kind of good ideas that really worth to be looked at, and really some of them became a kind of mainstream ideas currently. But we had two extreme ways of reformation, which many people have a bit of a problematic attitude toward these type of two extreme ways. One extreme way was actually to politicize pretty much ideas for the sake of a certain goal, which at this time was the goal of to get rid of the colonial power. The goal is honored, definitely any country would like to get rid of any colonial power, but in the same time, the way was a bit having repercussions later and impact later that was not that good. The other extreme way was actually to create Islam which has no Islam inside. Islam without Islam. So a new version of Islam, which all the basics that in the sources of Islam is not there. And this was also another extreme way to respond to the colonial power. One of them was a kind of due to the resistance, and the other one was due to inferiority complex. You feel that you are suppressed, you are colonialized, and those people are much better than you in your view, and then you start to create a new way to adapt to the current situation. So since the colonial era, we start to have, yes, reformation and deformation. Yeah, we started since the colonial era, we start to have reformation and deformation. Some ideas are not really reforming, but it's more like deforming the way of Islam. And some ideas are still good ideas that needed, and we need to look into it, and we need to see how things are going about it. One interesting point, I was reading recently one report for a quite well-known political scientist. His name is Shad Hamid. He's working in Carnegie Institute, I think, and he was talking about the issue of religion. And he put it very interestingly as a part of the conclusion of his report. He said, it's almost now consensus that religion is playing a bigger role in all international politics. And nobody can escape the idea that we need to come to a certain understanding and certain level of cooperation within the religious values. And he called the era that we are in, which this is maybe the first time I read it, but maybe if somebody else have say this term, he said we are living in a post-liberal era. So he said liberalism, we are already post-liberalism era. So, and there was another also scholar, I think 2 years back, he wrote a book and he talked about also a post-secular era. People, they don't know what this post mean. What does it mean exactly? We are post-secular, we are post-liberal era, but what will be next is not clear, because still I think we are in a very rapid evolving environment that we need to look into it and cope with it and try to bring new ideas in it. And when we come to the issue of reformation, the ideas of reformation, my personal belief, I studied a few reformers, people in the history of Islam, like Al-Ghazali himself, Said Nursi in Turkey, many other people in Egypt and other places, Muhammad Ibn Abd, Jamaluddin al-Afghani. I think the most successful reformation approaches, which I think Dr. Abdullah Naim is trying to stress on it in his book, is the reformers who will stick to the principles, stick to the values, which are shared values which are shared values. This is why sometimes when people ask, especially it's quite common now in many places in the world, especially Muslim majority countries, people will ask whether we are going to a secular state or Islamic state. And for me, this question is a political question. This is not the right question. The right question should be what I call the bigger questions. The bigger questions, are we having justice prevailing in this state or not? Are we having the human rights prevailing in this state or not? The issue whether this state, you call it whatever you want to call it secular, you call it Islamic state, you call it whatever you call it. But the main measure, and this is the main measure in Islam actually, the main measure in Islam is dignity and justice. Dignity and justice. So these are the bigger questions that we need to focus on. And if we stress on this part, then any reformation activity, whether in Islam or any other religion even, it will be very productive because we are linking to the human values, shared human values, a platform that everybody agrees upon, everybody aspire for, and everybody looking for it. And I think with this few ideas, I might open some discussion on the issue, but I wanted to put a framework for the idea of reformation and when this deformation start to happen historically. Of course, there's a lot of details time will not allow now, but we can discuss it later in any question and answer. And thank you very much for your listening and really appreciate this invitation.